Hi, this is Kathy Dukowski. I'm chair of the District 15 caucus, and welcome to the District 15 Town Hall. So in the District Caucus, we have Lisa Edwards as chair, Ginger McComber is the secretary, and Larry Arch is our treasurer. He's going to be also our moderator. District 15 goes from Potomac to Poolsville, Germantown, Boyds, Clarksburg. We have a large area. The purpose of tonight's town hall is to allow our D15 legislators to share their 2026 legislative accomplishments and to answer your questions about the 2026 legislative session. Larry is our charter treasurer, is the moderator, and we'll end around 8:45. Besides the questions, we'll be taking questions from the audience.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me? Well, let's welcome our District 15 Senator Brian Feldman and delegates Linda Foley, David Fraser-Hidalgo, and Lily Chi. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the elected representatives who are in the audience, and Andrew is going to fill in everybody I miss. We have Sheriff Lee, we have Marilyn Balcone from the County Council. Yeah. Bill Roberts, I think, is on Zoom. He's in the Central Committee. Andrew is in charge of the Central Committee, although he'll deny it. We have Mark Roglic from the Central Committee, who's also our AV specialist. And who have I missed? Simon Ahmad. So Simon, I didn't see you come in. How are you? Central Committee. Okay. So the way we're going to work is we're going to give Senator Feldman 10 minutes for an opening and 5 minutes from each of the other legislators. Then we have a list of minutes online, and we're going to go through all slew of those. And then we're going to, if we have time, which I think we will, we'll take some questions from the audience. So, Brian, you want to kick it off?
Yes, sir. Okay. Okay, well, 10 minutes may sound like a lot, but it's really not when you had 1,000 Senate bills and 1,700 House bills for a total of 2,700 bills, and 833 went to the governor's desk. I'll do my best to run through big picture, and then I'll pass it on to my teammates, and then we'll see where we land. Let me say at the outset, so I chair one of the 4 Senate committees. It's called the Education, Energy, Environment Committee, but the subject matter jurisdiction is the broadest of any committee in the General Assembly. So it's education, K through 12, higher ed, anything involving energy policy, environmental policy. But that includes cybersecurity, data centers, affordable housing, election law, ethics. So it's very, very broad. My committee alone had 290 Senate bills and 185 House bills. So we basically had 500 bills come through my one committee that I chair. I would also say, all those topics were hot. The other thing for this session, which was unique, was we had a new Speaker of the House, which really, doesn't happen very often. We've only had a handful of speakers in the last 50 years. Not only do we have a new speaker, Jocelyn Pena-Melnick from Prince George's County, she, for lack of a better term, cleaned house. And there's a lot of new committee chairs in the House of Delegates. So therefore, it was a very interesting, on that front, very, very interesting session, again, on multiple fronts. We have a great team here. All 3 of my teammates in the House of Delegates are chairs of subcommittees. Dave Fraser-Hidalgo here is on the Environment and Transportation Committee, chairs the Energy Subcommittee, which a lot of overlap with all that I'm going to talk about in a second. Linda Foley is also on that committee, chairs the Non-Energy Utilities Subcommittee. And then Lily Chi is on the Economic Matters Committee and chairs the Economic Development Subcommittee. So all three were involved in a lot of the action for this session. I got to work with each. I mentioned with Dave, we spent a lot of time, countless hours, on one of the biggest bills for this session dealing with energy policy, maybe the biggest outside of the budget. Delegate Foley and I sponsored a bill dealing with short-term rentals, and the first in the nation bill that would require that all short-term rentals, we're talking Airbnbs, would be required to have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide, workable carbon monoxide equipment. And the governor signed that bill. It was the second bill signed by Governor Moore on Tuesday, and it was really quite an event. And then Lily and I did have I think a really important bill together in the healthcare space for small businesses, make it easier for them to purchase health insurance for their employees. It did not get over the finish line. The chair of the Senate committee did not like it, but that chair is retiring, and next year I think there's huge opportunity for that piece of legislation. They also say that we got, again, this year, we did really, really well when it comes to bringing capital money back to District 15. And I'll just reel off again, all 100% of the requests that we put in, we got capital money for, and it was spread throughout the district. I see we've got our Poolsville commissioners here. I'm going to say Riverworks got money yet again. The pool bubble got money again, and several other projects in Poolsville got every dollar that was requested in those projects. We did well down in the Potomac area as well. We got money in the Upcounty Hub here in Germantown. We again down in Ivy Mount School. That school deals with kids with a certain amount of disabilities. Got money. We've got Hadley's Park, which is down at Poolsville, and we got money over in Clarksburg. The Clarksburg Yard got money. So I'll put that out there. The only thing, even though I said we had 2,700 bills, the only thing that we're required by the Constitution to do each session is to pass a balanced budget. That is all these other 2,699 bills are optional. And we did do it this session. It was balanced with no new taxes or fees. And that, I think, is an achievement. We ended up with a surplus actually going into next year of $250 million, and $2 billion was put into a rainy day fund. We continue to fund the so-called blueprint for Maryland's future. I will note that our public schools in Maryland improved for the third straight year, according to the latest Maryland School Report Card. We put a lot of money into Medicaid. Some of what we had to do this session is a response to what's happening on Capitol Hill. And there were a lot of changes to Medicaid, and a lot of folks, as a result of federal policies, were pushed off the rolls here in this state. And we did, I think it was important that we maintain critical healthcare funding for approximately 1.5 million Marylanders in our state are on Medicaid, and we took care of protecting those folks. We had put $100 billion towards energy rate relief on your energy bills. We still maintain a AAA bond rating with the major bond rating agencies, which keeps our borrowing costs down. And so that is important as well. Let me just focus on my own committee, and then I'll pass it on to my three teammates. Okay, one of the hottest issues facing the state this year had to do broadly with affordability. And that's higher and rising energy costs on utility bills, affordable housing. And again, my committee was in the middle of all that. And so we passed something called the Utility Relief Act, a 100-page bill. This is the one that Dave Fraser-Hidalgo and I worked on a lot. 100 pages. It's providing some short-term relief, longer-term relief, and I'll take any questions, but it's 100 pages. But as part of the bill, we come down pretty strongly on the issue of data centers to hold data centers responsible. The key there is they're going to have to, if any data center was to come to Maryland, they're going to have to pay their fair share for the impact on electricity rates. They're going to be held accountable for putting strain on our energy grid. They're going to have to pay for both the energy they consume and the infrastructure upgrades that they require. And there's a lot more in there in terms of the data centers. I would note that we're going to create a registry for these data centers that we can track where they are, where they're coming, all the other things involving environment, water. They're going to have to put all that information into play. And so we create a lot of incentives again for them to bring their own energy. And on the utility side, we hold our utilities accountable. There's a lot of things they've been doing over the years to they spend money and they pass it on to our ratepayers. We really went pretty big in terms of closing a lot of loopholes on what they're allowed to do and pass on to Maryland ratepayers. I think this is not a short term, this is short and long term part of the bill. And then we did a lot again to advance clean energy generation in our state. One of the biggest issues is we do not generate enough energy in Maryland. The demand for energy is accelerating with data centers and the like. We're not keeping pace. And last year we passed some big bills. This year we followed up with some big bills so that we can produce more in-state generation. Right now, 40% of the power we consume in Maryland, we have to import from out of state, which means more transmission lines, more expensive, all those things. A lot of it's dealt with in this bill and the bills we passed last year. On the education front, let me just reel off a few things. Something called the Compass Act, which came out of my committee, alters how public school performance is measured and reported. Basically, ultimately, it's helping the Maryland State Department of Education get a more accurate picture of where our public schools can be improved. Another hot topic has to do with cell phone use in our schools. And we passed a bill called the Phone Free Schools Act. It requires every local board of education to develop and implement a policy that will prohibit the use of cell phones in schools by the 2027 school year. Boards of education will, I agree, get some applause on that. Boards of education will engage families in the process, publicize the policies that are adopted, and then report the policies to the Maryland State Board of Education, which will publish each county's policies on their website. The issue of child care scholarships was also a very hot topic in the committee. We have waiting lines and wait lists. 1 minute, okay. I can talk more about that. On the environmental front, we passed major legislation involving PFAS. I can talk to you about from Senator Love from District 16 came to the committee. Housing, we passed multiple bills dealing with affordable housing. We have a 100,000 inventory shortage in our state, and there's several bills. I can't do it in 30 seconds that address that topic. AI, election law. The biggest disappointment I would say for this session, we passed a Voting Rights Act, big important, but a bill from Delegate Foley, the special elections bill that how we fill legislative vacancies, which has passed 3 straight years out of the Senate, went this year to the House. We thought this was going to get done. Bill came back to the Senate on day 90. And we ran out of time, which is very, very unfortunate. Okay, bottom line is Andrew's given me the red card. A great team, real honor to serve with this team. They deserve to be, I'd say the whole team deserves to be reelected. And there's a lot I left on my sheet. It seemed like the 10 minutes went quick, but with that, I'm going to turn it over to seconds left. So there's 3,000 bills I'm not going to get to in a few seconds. Okay, David, Fraser-Hidalgo.
You think 10 minutes went fast? I got 5. No. I just start out by saying, so kind of from a macro picture, you all know we got a new speaker, and Speaker Penny Melnick did not waste any time. She hit the ground. When I say running, she was like at a full sprint. She created a 7th committee, which meant pulling off about 4 members out of the other 6 committees and creating a separate committee, which we called GLEE, that deal with a lot of government type of stuff. She made a lot of changes, moved a lot of people around. As many of you know, I was on the Environment and Transportation Committee for 9 years, and then I moved over to Economic Matters because I wanted to deal with energy. I was really excited to deal with energy, and I got over there and I got to hang out with my really great friend, Lily. We sat next to each other, and I just basically annoyed her for 3 years. And we had a great time of it. And then when the new speaker came in, she said, I'm going to move energy over to environment and transportation, and I'd like you to go if you'd like to. And I said, absolutely. So I went over to environment and transportation to do energy, and it was a very, very big lift because there wasn't really, that subject matter hadn't been on the environmental committee for over 20 years. So it was a lot of educating both myself and the committee, and just trying to get it as up to speed as we possibly could. We had briefings from the public service commissions, from the Department of Energy, from all of, we ended up getting a briefing from the Public Service Committee from California and from Texas, because we wanted kind of a red and blue. And we worked really hard to get everybody up to speed. And then we worked on the speaker's bill, which was HB 1532 and SB 841, Senator Feldman's bill. And we kicked it out to the Senate, and it was 125 pages at first. And then when we finally kicked it out of the House, it got down to 76 pages. By the time the Senate was done with it, Senator Feldman is being very modest. I think it was 170 some pages. Now, granted, some of that was like cut out and just drawn lines, but it's still a very big bill. That had HB1 in it, which is the capping of the utility CEOs and executives. And so that's kind of how things went. It was a very busy session. The speaker passed. She pushed on a lot of things. She pushed on redistricting. She pushed on 287G. She pushed on the Trust Act. She made energy the number one issue. So we had to do, all of that. I will say, going back to environmental transportation was a lot of fun. Then I got to work with Linda directly, because I worked with Linda her first year down, and then I left. And I worked with Lily for 3 years, and I went back, and now I'm working with Linda again. And it was great. It was a lot of work. This is the largest bill. Again, Senator Feldman, he can call me a whiner if he wants, but I think it's probably the largest energy bill that's come out in probably 15 or 20 years. Is that right? Sure. So with that said, I could go into some details. I had a bunch of bills. Most of them got swallowed up into the speaker's bill. The really cool thing about HB 1532 is what we did is we just grabbed various bills, energy bills, and pulled them into her bill, which went from 10 pages to 20 pages, to 40 pages, to 50 pages, to 100, to 150, like Senator Freyester had all the data center stuff. That was a lot that came in on the Senate side. So let's see, the team is absolutely amazing. Couldn't have done it, and I have to say, I've leaned on the team, especially these two, while I was doing all the energy stuff, because the energy stuff was so big. So a big thank you to both of my friends and colleagues for helping give me the time to work on the energy stuff. I think Senator Feldman talked mostly about it. Data centers, Empower, an auction, $200 million, $100 million next year, $100 million the year after, to do an auction for renewables. Are we out of time? 1 minute, okay. So I think Senator Feldman covered most of it. Let's see, electric vehicle reporting, residential solar permitting. That was a big piece for me. It was my bill that got folded up into the speaker's bill, which was basically trying to figure out how we can reduce the cost and speed up the timeline for residential deployment of residential solar. Because with 30% federal tax credit, that's a problem. And I can go into, or we can go into later if you want, kind of the reasons for all the spikes in electric and utility costs. It's complicated, but I am happy to, when we have a little more time, maybe in the Q&A, to go into the details. It has a lot to do with what's going on around the entire country. It's not just in Maryland, and it's not just within the PJM. So that's it. I'm going to pass it on. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Let's go straight down the line. Linda Foley.
Thank you, and thank you, Dave, for all the work that you and Senator Feldman did on the utility relief bill. I just can't say enough about that bill. That bill is incredible. It addresses so many issues related to utilities and power and utility bills and more capacity for electricity, and the amount of work led largely by these two folks here on our District 15 team was incredible. So thank you both for all the work that you put into that bill. It was pretty amazing. I'm going to touch real quickly on some of the immigration stuff that we did, because that was another big issue for us. We did pass a couple of bills to rein in law enforcement cooperation with ICE. And basically, we want to make sure that our law enforcement is not co-opted to be effectively ICE agents going around deporting people. So we passed a couple of bills on that. Those were very tough bills. We also passed a Voting Rights Act that was very important that I think Senator Feldman mentioned. And then we also did pass a bill prohibiting face coverings for all law enforcement. Yeah, you can apply for that. I do want to spend my 5 minutes talking about some of the bills that I sponsored. Senator Feldman mentioned the Short-Term Rental Fire Safety Act, named for a family from Montgomery County who went on vacation and two of their daughters perished in a fire. So it's the Jillian and Lindsay Weiner Short-Term Rental Fire Safety Act. Senator Feldman mentioned that. We also worked on a bill, all of us, along with District 14. It was HB 1071 and SB 861 to revamp stormwater management on agricultural land. This is mainly for agritourism and agribusinesses so that they're not held to the same standards, for example, on parking lots that Walmart would be, right? So this bill helps our constituents in that regard. Senator Feldman and I also sponsored a bill to promote carbon dioxide capture and wood char and wood vaulting technology, which is complicated but important. And the bill that we pass will allow that kind of technology to go forward. I think Senator Feldman mentioned one of the bills I sponsored was on reporting of bullying, harassment, and intimidation incidences in schools based upon characteristics like anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim, anti-LGBTQ, things like that. That was a bill that I sponsored. I had two important bills relating to collective bargaining rights for professors at the University of Maryland. Non-tenured professors now have collective bargaining rights at the University of Maryland, which I'm very proud of. Thank you. You can apply for that too. And also in limited circumstances for graduate assistants who are graduate students who do work in teaching as teaching assistants or research assistants. That bill needs a little more work. We're going to come back and do some work on that bill. But I'm also very proud to have been able to pass that bill. Another bill that I sponsored was one that requires the state agencies to spend at least 50% of their digital and print advertising dollars in local media. We have a crisis in local media in this country, and we see it every day. It's very hard to get information about what's going on in our communities on a local basis because our local media infrastructure is disintegrating. So I was very proud to also sponsor that bill. And let me just say that Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo mentioned our new speaker, Speaker Jocelyn Pena-Melnick from Prince George's County. I just want to point out that she was actually born in the Dominican Republic, and now she is Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates. That is an amazing American story, and it is an amazing Maryland story. And we are so fortunate that we live in this state where we try to take care of people. It's really hard with what's going on in Washington, and and particularly since we're so close to the nation's capital, and so many of our folks are impacted by what's happening there. But we are really trying to protect our people and to make sure that we have, we do what we can to preserve our life and our rights here in Maryland. So thank you for letting us serve, and I'm happy to answer any questions as we go forward. I'm going to turn it to
Lily Chi.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, first of all, thank you for braving the heat. When Kathy told me that it's going to be 80 degrees, she said, should we just do virtual or whatever? I said, Kathy, I grew up without air conditioning. I think I'll be fine. So thank you very much for showing up. So I, first of all, want to take a moment to thank my Chief of Staff, Katie Hardy. All the staff worked very hard supporting us. We wouldn't be as accomplished and productive without their very hard work every day of the year, not just during the session. So I just collectively thank all of the staff, but my staff happens to be here. And also, I want to congratulate my district colleagues for an extraordinary session. I think I can count each of them having done a lot to carry the water. Each of them are in different leadership positions and really stepped up and did a tremendous amount of work. I want to congratulate all of them. It truly is an honor to serve with them. So this session, I think you can imagine just about every state in the country is focusing on affordability. So cost of living is a huge central theme, and it's reflected in our focus on energy, housing, and childcare for the most part, as well as healthcare. We kind of were forced, our hands were forced when the federal government rolled back their support for Obamacare, right? So as you can understand. So talking about changes in the House, the speaker called me after she got elected about committee reassignments and changes. I used to serve as the chair of business regulation. And when she called me about that, I said, actually, I would like to switch to being the chair of economic development, since now you created this new economic development subcommittee. I said, I am more interested in helping businesses grow than regulating businesses at this point in our state's life. I think we need to do more economic development. She said, okay. So then I became economic development subcommittee chair, which is exactly what I'm interested in. And I'm proud to have ushered through several bills, big and small, this session to advance Maryland's economic competitiveness. They range from the governor's priority bill, which is called the Decade Act, that comprehensively evaluates and realigns all of the economic development tax credits and programs to make sure they still reflect today's economy and are actually effective in attracting private capital and growing jobs. And then several bills, including a couple I sponsored that would support tech-based economic development, which is or should be Maryland's competitive advantage, as well as rural economic development. We now have a rural caucus in the House, which the speaker was very proud of. It's a bipartisan caucus. I am now part of the portfolio for both land use and zoning, as well as housing. So I got to spend a lot of time in both of these subcommittees working on transit-oriented development, housing affordability, housing construction. And this session, we pushed through two big housing bills of the governor's priority bills. One is to streamline fees and limits rule changes by local jurisdictions after projects have received approval. You can imagine the developers' frustrations if they thought they have already done all of gone through all the red tape, and all of a sudden you add this fee and that limit, and then projects never got off the ground. In order to create more affordable housing, we need to expand the housing supply. It's as simple as that. So the other one is transit-oriented development to incentivize TOD and automatically designates these projects as enterprise zone projects to enjoy certain benefits and prohibits local counties from imposing certain limitations. And we also would delay collecting impact fees until the construction is complete. Now, our current council member, Marilyn Balcom, and the future council member, Scott Gober, may not like the fact that we're going to limit the county's power, but we have to do certain baseline limits. And a couple of highlights of my bills, I focused on economic development, consumer protection, and election reform. I mentioned economic development work, including a couple of bills to support small businesses. Senator Feldman mentioned the health insurance for small business, and also to level the playing field for independent labs to be allowed to compete for contracts by insurance carriers. But I'm very proud that we passed a bill called the Jack Fitzgerald Price Transparency Act. Mr. Jack Fitzgerald passed it last year. He was a staunch consumer advocate. And I introduced this bill several years in a row. Finally, we passed it in his honor to help consumers have greater transparency in pricing, right? And regrettably, my two AI chatbot bills for consumer protection did not pass. Thank you, Andrew. I'm wrapping up. But one of them passed the House, and I will soldier on for all those people who have fallen victims of AI chatbots. So I'm going to stop here. I just want to say I'm very proud of one of my proudest moments was introducing the open primaries bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go through some of the questions that were submitted in advance online. They're not addressed to any particular one of you, so you can decide who it best is to answer it. First question is straightforward. Will the detention center in Hagerstown be stopped?
Well, it has been stopped
Okay.
because there's an injunction now. Whether that holds or not, we don't know. So I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, but it is stopped now.
A lot of, okay,
Yeah, so the court did come and there's a preliminary injunction in place on the Hagerstown, but on top of that, though, we did pass, and if you want to look at the specifics, House Bill 1017, it puts restrictions in law in terms of operating detention centers in Maryland broadly. They're going to have to, they can only be built in places where the local zoning permits it, and therefore, putting aside one Hagerstown detention center, which is stuck in the courts, we did pass legislation more broadly to put guardrails on future potential detention centers.
thank you. Next question. A lot of disappointing citizens were looking forward to redistricting. What is the real reason the Senate blocked it?
They're looking at me because there's a Senate president issue. Okay, here's we went through this, 4 or 5 years ago where right now, just remember, we have a 7-1 map. Okay. We created a 8-0 map, quite frankly, to target the one Republican on the Eastern Shore 4 years ago. The court threw that map out. And so it's not like we haven't been through this before to some extent. This year, I think there were a couple other things in play. First of all, it's one thing to say redistricting in a generic sense. It's another thing to actually see a map. What does the map for Congressional 6 look like? For example, the most competitive district in the state of Maryland is Congressional 6. I see some we've got a Trone Delaney battle going on here, and the Republicans in that district are competitive. And so to talk about it without actually seeing a map was one issue. But I think more to the point, when a map did emerge from the House of Delegates, we were told by the State Board of Elections that, let me step back. Right now, there would be a lawsuit if we pass it. Right now, and again, not many people talk about it, of the 7 Supreme Court justices in Maryland, 5 are Hogan appointees. So the idea that the court process is going to yield something that could ultimately could easily result in not a 7-1 map, but a 6-2 map. Because the court doesn't have to send it back to the General Assembly if they don't like the map. They can redo their own map, which is what they did 2 redistricts ago. And so, and as you get closer to the February 24th filing deadline, which is where we were, and a lawsuit comes in, the Board of Elections said that we get to February, if you're still dealing with this, we're going to have to move the primary dates from June to potentially August or September. Which, if you're on the ballot, everybody in the General Assembly is on a ballot. The idea of moving from June to September had its own kind of thing. Another thing, I don't want to belabor the point about the potential for chaos, was Maryland's a unique state. You can petition a bill to referendum in November. So a bill that emerged here, if it were to pass, can be petitioned by the Republicans to be on a ballot in November. So you have this bizarre scenario, putting aside lawsuits, moving primary dates, but not knowing what the outcome is or what district you're even running in. So there was a more here. I'm not saying that there was, I get the move to want to do it, but 7-1, you can get a little greedy with 7-1 and end up with a 6-2 map. And specifically, because we do represent a big, a legislative district that has this CD6 in it, there was a risk factor involved, and the closer we got to having to move. So I think that's a long-winded answer, but it wasn't like straight up, let's do it. There's not going to be litigation. We're going to go 8-0. I mean, I have to say that it was a little more complicated than I think was, actually out in the ecosystem discussed. So.
Thank you, Brian.
Very long.
Here's an interesting question. Is it possible to change the state, the county portion of the state income tax, the county surcharge for Montgomery County so it is a sliding scale based on income rather than a fixed amount? And would that...
You have to delegate because this involves economic development. Yes, the answer is yes.
It's not really economic, it's taxation.
It is taxation.
We passed a bill a few years ago to allow counties a bit more flexibility so they can look at income instead of having one flat rate. The risk is that some counties can go rogue with that, okay? Like Montgomery County, okay? We're looking at 6%, that's 6.3% property tax increase. And some very frustrated residents emailed me and said, do you realize increasing property is making it less affordable? Why do you keep talking about affordability? I said, first of all, I wish I had a power over county government. This is, talk to your independently elected county executive and the county council. But I mean, when you have 6% property tax increase, that is much higher than the inflation. And on income tax, we can only do enabling. The county government has to decide at local level. So be very careful who you vote for. That's all I can say.
Thank you. What legislative changes were enacted that will impact Maryland taxes? I mean, I know you said that we didn't raise taxes and fees, but this is a general question that's a bit.
We really did not touch our income tax code. I do think our tax code is at this point in some need of reform. I've actually introduced bills to create a commission to do a restructuring of our income tax code. But the reality is we didn't touch that topic hardly at all this session.
Senate Bill 662 and House Bill 1355 for stablecoin implementation was passed and is awaiting the governor's signature. Would somebody explain what this is and you think the governor will sign it?
Okay, well, and I'll yield to somebody else. I will say the bill passed. I'm pretty sure that
one of the constituents and I talked and we figured out the status of the bill. So yeah, it passed to both chambers. So the governor will sign it.
Yeah. And it does, the Commissioner of Financial Regulation, which we do have, will have a lot of oversight in terms of regulatory framework to govern that topic. But it did pass. It's on the governor's desk.
What will you do next legislative session to protect the Strategic Energy Investment Fund for clean energy and energy efficiency?
Yeah, that's the SEEF fund. So I think that what this question is probably getting at is that for the last couple of years, the governor has gone in and grabbed some of that money to help balance the budget, which in our view is a big no-no because that money is for energy and energy relief. So a couple of things that we did. One is there are something called alternative compliance payments, and those rose and put a lot more money in the SEEF than people originally thought. And so it kind of got built up pretty quickly, and that made it attractive to the governor to take it. So a couple of the things that we did is we have spent a lot of that money this year, and in the next coming years, we allocated money in the next coming years to spend it down so that it wasn't so attractive. And we also put a piece in the Relief Act, I think, that limited that budget to no more than, I think it's like $50 million, just to kind of dissuade the governor in the future from being able to grab that money. But I mentioned the auction, which is $100 million next year and $100 million the next year that's being pulled out of that, as well as a couple of other pieces when it comes to, we're also taking money out of that for Empower. So we're doing a lot to spend it down so it's not so attractive, and we're doing a lot to limit the future for it getting too big.
One of the ways that legislature lowered utility bills was to cut the Empower program. Won't this raise bills in the long run? And I know Brian mentioned something, you did some long-term planning also, so I think you can come on.
Right. I think, when it comes to Empower, it's a very complicated program. And what we were trying to do was balance the short-term needs of reducing utility rates with the long-term needs of, as we spend money in Empower, that overall reduces electric bills for a variety of reasons, depending on how you do it and how you measure it. So what we tried to do this time was kind of put a slowdown on it for a couple of years, and then slowly bring it back up so that eventually we start to continue to fully implement Empower once we get some of these utility costs under control. And on that note, I think it's very important. I kind of hinted at it earlier, and I'll just mention it because we haven't gotten a chance to get into it. The utility costs are as high as they are for a vast majority is because of data center deployment. Senator Feldman mentioned, we're gonna have a kind of a phantom load registry to try and figure out how to kind of keep that phantom load, keep the data centers when it comes to how you define a data center, taking it from 100 megawatts to 25 megawatts. We've done a lot to try to limit that impact, but I think it's important to know this is a worldwide issue. This is AI. For anybody in this room or anybody that's watching at home that likes to use ChatGPT or Claude or any of those, this is what's driving the data centers. This is what's driving the data centers is AI. This is a revolution like we haven't seen probably since the Industrial Revolution. We just might not necessarily see it as upfront and personal, but you're feeling it in the cost of your utility bill. So I think it's important to understand that we worked very, very hard to try to bring the rates down as much as we could within the limitations of what we can do as a state. Remember, this is a national issue. These are prices are up all over the country. Within the entire PJM, the prices are up. So we did everything that we could. I think we pretty much threw the entire kitchen sink at what we could do and limiting what happens in the future as best as possible.
Yeah, can I just add on this, because this is a hot topic. So the Empower program there's a surcharge. It is on every Marylander's bill. The surcharge, the Empower program has been very, very successful. I think maybe that's the point of the question. If you look, every study, including ones in 22, 23, 24, for every dollar surcharge spent, ratepayers of our state through energy efficiency, less demand, have actually gotten the benefit of $2+ But this year, there was a tremendous amount of political desire to bring down some relief for folks in the short term. The Republicans in our chamber, including I had to defend this bill, the Republicans had amendments to get rid of the entire power program, just get rid of it. That also would have eliminated the surcharge. But we decided to take a middle ground saying, look, we hear you. We're gonna reduce the goals for a period of time, and then eventually you're gonna go back to where they are gonna be anyway. And so we were able to get some short-term relief. But again, we're gonna eliminate the Empower program. We did a reduction of the goals for a few years. Eventually, they're gonna be back to where they would have been under current law. So it was a bit of a tension and set of trade-offs. But that, in a nutshell, is where we went for some of the short-term relief aspects of that bill.
Another questioner asked about the Utility Relief Act, which I think you spoke about, and says that it sets up opportunities to build new fossil fuel plants in Maryland. Is that true? And what do you say about that?
Okay, there's nothing, this bill was heavy on renewable energy. Dave mentioned reverse auction. We did reforms to net metering, which is community solar. In fact, that was one of the criticisms on the floor. It's too much about renewable. The thing about renewables, and particularly solar and battery storage, and Dave alluded, it was mentioned, because of the expiration investment tax credits under the federal bill of last year, that's the power that can get online the quickest. Those are the projects that are in the so-called PJM queue. We can get online quicker. Natural gas, nuclear are potentially part of the longer term mix, but we were very much emphasized this session in that bill. How do we get, again, solar, community solar, battery storage online quick, and we put money into that program. So nothing in this bill, particularly from this session, does that. David?
Yeah, the other thing that I would add is, as much as we fight this on both the House floor and the Senate floor, different politics, but very similar in a lot of ways, it is very challenging to get through when many of the Republicans voted against it, even though it saved their constituents, their ratepayers money. And as far as, developing and pushing forward on renewables, the only thing that's available, despite everything that the Trump administration is doing to kill renewables, the only thing that's deployable now is renewables. I mean, if you want a natural gas plant, the turbine to run that, which is usually made by like General Electric or another company, there's a 6-year wait to get one of those. So you can say anything you want. People are like, oh my God, we need more natural gas. We need more natural gas. Okay, well, where's your turbine? So that's 6 years away. Nuclear is anywhere from 9 to 12 years away. What you can deploy now on your roof is solar. That's what you can deploy, even in the face of the Trump administration's war on offshore wind and the Trump administration's war on anything and everything solar, renewable, battery storage. So I think that's worth just kind of putting into that formula.
I'm going to go through a couple more of these and then ask the audience to raise their hands if you have any questions. So start thinking about what you might want to ask our legislators. Picking up on that, when someone asked a general question, did we make any progress on climate issues this year?
I can take that.
Climate.
Climate issue. Yeah. We didn't spend as much on climate issues this year as we have in the past. We were very focused on, as we've been talking about, the utilities. And in that bill, as Senator Feldman said, there is a lot with respect to renewable energies, technology and renewable energy generation. So that's important. I did mention that we had this carbon capture bill that we sponsored, that Senator Feldman and I sponsored, about new technology and enabling new technology. Senator Feldman mentioned that there was a PFAS bill that passed to help regulate forever chemicals. That was a very important bill. And so there was some attention paid to things like stormwater management and obviously with the Potomac interceptor sewage rupture, we did spend some time on that issue, mainly to be briefed on that issue, but we spent time on that issue as well as there were some issues around sewer systems and what we're doing, particularly in Baltimore County. There are issues around the sewer system there that they share with Baltimore City. So there were some guardrails put around that. So there was some action on the environmental front, but most of that was with respect to the utilities relief bill. Did you want to say more, Dave?
The only thing I would just want to read the titles, not anything under the title. And then if anybody wants to ask questions, we can go over it later. From the Utility Relief Act that we passed, Green and Renewable Energy Efficiency Nonprofit Loan Program, Electric Vehicle Emission Reporting Program, Electric Utility Service Program, Residential Solar Permitting, Environmental Trust Fund, Public Service Commission Transparency and Dashboard Act, require a notice for distribution of cost increase to ratepayers, large load customer tariffs, regional transmission organizations or RTO mandates, transmission lines property owner notification, transmission lines underground, GETS, which is grid enhancing technologies, prevailing wage for solar energy, Maryland Energy Storage Program, capacity reporting, Empower Maryland changes, data center registration, data center voluntary clean capacity registration program, portable solar energy registration program, generating systems, retail electric supply, modification to the Drive Act, definition of large capacity energy resources, nuclear energy procurement, strategic energy planning office, data center, TIF district prohibition, fast track procurement for technical fixes, renewable energy solar purchase agreements, strategic energy investment fund we've talked about, alternative compliance payments, fee auctions, multi-year plans, investor-owned utility supervisor and customer cost recovery, net metering energy, forecast test years, procurement, transmission, energy storage devices, energy site and zoning permitting study. These are just the big highlights.
So the answer to the question is yes, you did do things for climate change. Here's and I'll call it a philosophical question. What do you see as the most important strategy for the Democratic Party to reach and engage additional voters ahead of the November midterm elections? And how should that strategy adapt to different types of voters across districts with very different political and demographic profiles? Anyone want to?
I'll speak to that. I feel very strongly that we can do much better. So I find myself having to oftentimes explain democracy to my people, as well as the Democratic Party principles and platform and all of that. Not only do they not understand the two-party system necessarily, but also many immigrants and young people these days are reluctant to join political parties because to many young people, they feel like we created the mess. The adults created the mess. Now they are inheriting. They don't trust either party to carry the water for them going forward. So when it comes to diversity and inclusion for Democratic Party, I think we need to meet people where they are. And for my people, it's social media platforms beyond the mainstream media platforms that people don't monitor. Whether it's Latino community or Asian community, they use their niche social media. And there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation in their native languages that nobody's monitoring. And they have tremendous influence on people's election outcomes. Okay, so who's speaking to these people matters and how you translate the message, right? And the other thing is election reform. In a state where 1 in 4 registered voter is independent, and they're duly registered taxpayers who fund our elections, but they cannot vote in elections that matter. This is flat out undemocratic in my mind. You can sugarcoat it any way you want, but the fact is it's undemocratic to lock out 1 million voters who fund our elections, just like all of us do, but they cannot have a meaningful say in close the primary elections. I think that's the root cause of low morale and mistrust. People give up. They said, my voice is not gonna matter because by the time it's general election, it's a done deal, right? So it creates resentment among a lot of people. I don't think we should force people to join the political party to make their votes matter, which was why I introduced the open primaries. Most states in the country have open primaries, like two-thirds, more than two-thirds now. Okay, so Maryland is a small minority of people. You know, when I had open primaries hearing this year, that was my proudest moment. I did not expect how many veterans showed up and said, I pledge allegiance to my country, but not parties. It was so powerful. I was blown away. But young people came, cultural minority groups and people from other states. I think there are a lot of work that is so obvious that we could have done or can do, and of course, this is a very long conversation we can have, but don't get me started, please.
On a more macro picture, because I think this is important. Because as we continue to see the Trump administration's assault on everything that we stand for, I think it's important. We have the loss of 25,000 federal jobs last year in the state of Maryland. Per capita, that's not even per capita the greatest. That's just the greatest across the country. No other state has lost 25,000 federal jobs. That doesn't include consultant jobs. That doesn't include everything else. And ICE and the way that ICE has responded and what ICE has done in Minnesota and around the country, I think is very concerning. In a whole other lifetime ago, several lifetimes ago, I was in law enforcement, and our job was to protect and serve. And what I see ICE doing is akin to what you saw in the 1930s and 40s. They've turned into many of them, not all of them, but many of them have turned into brown shirts, and it's very, very concerning. And I think, what we've seen just in the last couple of days with this whole Donald Trump, Jesus Christ thing that he did, I don't even want to go into it. More than that, I would like to think that there are some of our friends and family that voted for him and that are now having some regrets. So what I would say to you, and I know this might be hard, but I would encourage that transition, and whatever you say, do not say, I told you so. Don't do that. As much as you might want to say that, don't say, I told you so. Just open them, welcome them with open arms.
I don't want to belabor this, but this point, because I think my colleagues made some great points, but I do want to say that these No Kings protests that we have seen happening and springing up You know, I'm a veteran of protests my whole life. That was kind of my life before I got here, was being in protests. And I've been in a lot of really important protests, hundreds of thousands, in one case, 1 million people coming to Washington, D.C. and marching, right, to show our support. What's important about these No Kings protests is that they are local and they are organic. They, you know, you don't see printed signs. You see people drawing their own signs. And what we as the Democratic Party have to do, in addition to everything that's been said here, is we have to channel that energy, that localized, hyper-local energy, we have to channel that to the ballot box. And so when people say, why do we keep having these protests? As long as they keep getting bigger, which they are, it's going to be good, and it's going to be good for our democracy. Then we also have to take that and translate that into the ballot box.
Thank you. One more question, and we'll get up to the audience. This is an interesting question. Do we need a longer legislative session? I watched any hours of 4 hours
No,
Saturday and Monday with banana. You're talking about how many things died because you ran out of time. Do we need a longer session?
After just, this is not a good time to ask this after spending 90 days. I don't think there's that much appetite to go beyond the 90 days, which is in our constitution. That's just my take on things.
Yeah, I'm going to
I
ask
concur.
anyone from the audience. Oh, did someone want to say something? I'm going to ask anyone from the audience who has a question to raise their hand. I'll try to go in the order in which they were.
I need a mic, yes. Okay, I am the chair for Poolsville, the precinct captain. And my anticipation for this election is that Donald Trump and his administration is going to do anything he can to steal the election. And one of the possibilities is to use ICE to go in November on election day and to intimidate people by just showing up. Well, I'm not going to have that. So the question I have for you guys, for all of you is, are there plans for how we're going to deal with that if something like that happens so that we don't have intimidation by ICE? I could see that happening.
yeah, I mean, we don't know. I mean, for sure, like what's going to happen. I think that what we did, if we did one thing in the legislative session besides energy, is we sent a very clear message that ICE is not welcome in Maryland, and we will not cooperate with ICE in Maryland. So if they want to send ICE to the polling places around the country, I don't know what we can do about that. I think in Maryland, it's going to be very hard for them to be able to really get a foothold here and, you know, and be able to really intimidate people like they would elsewhere. So I am optimistic that in Maryland, we are not going to see so much of that.
I'm wondering if we could work with local police and they would be on the side of protecting the people and the voters to come and push ICE away from control. That's just a thought. It's a strange thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's some law enforcement in the room. Maybe they would make better sense for them to take it. I will say I have a lot of confidence in our law enforcement agencies in the state. I have a lot of confidence, particularly in our law enforcement agencies in Montgomery County, to follow the rule of law and to follow the U.S. Constitution. I do not have that same thought process, and I do not have that same confidence when it comes to ICE. So I'm not sure how that is going to work out, but I do believe that, at least in Montgomery County, I believe our police department will do whatever they can within the law to ensure that we are following the Constitution. And I do think that ICE is viewed so negatively that if they do come to Maryland to try to do these things, I think it's going to get fairly ugly pretty quickly. And so I'm not sure that Maryland is the state that they will pick to do that. They'll probably pick some other border states. And I don't mean border states as in the southern border or the northern border. I mean border states as in states that they may or may not win.
Next question.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. Really appreciate all of your hard work over the past year, especially the last 90 days, that period. I'm wondering.
Can you identify yourself?
Oh, yes. My name is Maria McClure. I'm a Clarksburg resident. And I'm wondering about the conversation surrounding affordability, affordable housing, business, employment, and that sort of thing, and how we balance that. I know that the county has more of a say at some level of what developments get brought in, but is there anything that you can do to enforce or strongly suggest that more business could be brought into other parts of the county? Because part of being affordable and part of being able to get daycare is if I'm not spending an hour and a half driving to and from work, if I could work closer to home, that's the whole point of the affordable housing, right? Was to let anybody work closer or live closer to where they work and to where they play. So what can we do to make that better? And what can we do to actually get the roads built that were in the master plans? So is there anything that you guys can do towards that?
Actually, much of that decision would be at the county level. I'm looking at my county council member, Marilyn Malcolm. She's on top of these things. These are super local decisions. As far as Montgomery County is concerned, at state level, we do a lot of business regulation and certain incentive programs that categorically apply to all jurisdictions. But for a county that is geographically so diverse, whether you have a high density of population around transit areas and then versa, we are absolutely right. The key is how to make sure that the job center is close to population center, because the previous generation's planning was separating people where they live, where they work, where they shop or do things. Now we want to collapse them into live, work, and play, mixed use for efficiency, environmental sustainability, and all kinds of reasons. But it's a new trend and it takes time. And some people don't like development in their backyards, and the cost of building things is high, regulation is stringent. So it's not easy, but there are certain incentives to bring people to certain places, but it's a process, you know. It's transit-oriented development is an example, but these things are slower, you know. The county also can make certain strategic decisions so that it creates cluster of places that are attractive, amenity rich, you know.
Can I ask one follow-up to that? Yeah. If I could just add a follow-up.
Sure.
For example, transit decisions like an exit for 270 at the in Clarksburg. That, you know, it's like, well, we don't want it, but I think it's on the state to decide if the 270 exits can be. Right, which.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead, Brian.
and maybe Marilyn could speak to that specific. I'll just make a big broad picture. First of all, if you can't get from point A to point B, good luck growing your economy. That is a huge problem for our region. And you know, to your broader point, I have a lot of concerns. Montgomery County, in particular, has a branding problem relative to our neighbors across the river in Northern Virginia, which is why elections do matter. It's important. And so we can do things at the state level. Like I will tout one bill of mine. We have touted the biotech sector. Lily's been involved. So this session, I did pass a bill. We have NIH. We have FDA consolidated headquarters with building biotech. And yet 2% of all the clinical trial economic activity in our state. Shutting me down? Okay. Is here in Maryland. So we did pass a bill to remove some regulatory hurdles and to bring clinical trial economic activity to the state of Maryland, and bill that I passed this year. But back to the transportation issue. One of the challenges, Montgomery County is much larger now than it was at one time. Still, may as well be different countries. Same thing with inside the Beltway, outside the Beltway. When we talk about transportation policy and transit, the folks who are representing Chevy Chase, Bethesda, their highest priority is not extra exits on 270. Now, for our district, for us, and that's why I think Maryland was an outstanding addition to the council, you need some political sort of, you know, juice that everybody is If Montgomery County's going to go to the Department of Transportation, State Highway, but we speaking with 12 different voices, that undercuts our ability to do some things that absolutely need to be done on the transportation front. In this part of the county, the biggest issue, nobody wants to be in a parking lot at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning. And yet, okay, one final thing on this. If you, somebody referred to me that they are living in Chevy Chase, and they were talking about Rockville Town Center as the up county. I'm like, no, have you ever, that is not the up county, you know, Poolesville's the up county, you know, Rockville's mid county. So Montgomery County is a more complicated issue. And again, the politics of Tacoma Park are different than the politics of Poolesville, and it plays out in Annapolis, plays out here. That's a big long-winded answer. There's a lot we can still do at the state level. It's not all about county, but there's stuff here at the county level, I think, that could be done. We need more Maryland Balcombs on the county council. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Any other questions?
Brian, thank you so much for that. I am from Poolesville and I identify with what you're talking about. So you make a very good point. I do want to focus on what Lily said, though, and to some extent what David said. At the No Kings protest recently I was at, I saw people holding up signs that were handmade, but more importantly, most of them were humorous. There were a few negative ones, but there was a guy holding up a sign, for example, that said, "You sucked in Home Alone 2." I mean, that's the kind of thing, that kind of dialogue I think our kids resonate to. I can tell you, talking to my grandkids, they know the issues. My grandson is 13 and he said, "Are you getting Social Security?" I said, "I'm 73, yes." He said, "Do you think it's going to be around when I get to your age?" I said, they want to understand this stuff. And to your point about democracy, yes, they've got to understand it, but they got to understand why it provides value to them and a better economy in the long term. You've talked about it a lot, Lily, and you're absolutely right. This kind of a democracy does do that. So they need to understand that better. And that's part of education. Our school system doesn't do a great job of educating them about democracy, how it works, why it works the way it does, and what it means for our society. Those are all, I think, related issues, honestly. And if we can get some of those right, I think we can actually make some headway. And communicate, as you said, to Gen Z in a way that's interesting, not boring. Look at Chuck Schumer's website if you want to see what I'm talking about. It is totally boring.
I'm going to ask everybody to ask a question rather than, you know,
Okay, so
make a statement as much as possible.
yeah.
Gary?
Yeah, hi, Gary Arnage. Not a statement per se. Thanks for everybody that's here and the great work you've been doing. I was kind of, I would say, shocked when I got my vehicle registration bill for my electric car. It like tripled. You know, $300 for 1 year vehicle registration. Can you explain how that happened and how it increased so much? I know I don't pay gas tax, but in any event.
Part of that was because last year we did raise registration fees for, that was last year, last session, not this session. We did raise registration fees for vehicles. We did that across the board. But the other part of that is what you just mentioned, Gary, in your question. And that is that we have a looming crisis in our highway trust fund because the gasoline tax is not funding it. It's not funding it because people, for a number of reasons, not the least of which is, well, the real reason is people aren't using as much gasoline as they used to. And a big part of that is electric vehicles, which, you know, we really like and we want to incentivize. So there was a lot of thought given to what do we do to try to make, to both bolster our highway trust fund and also to have, I mean, electric vehicles use the roads, right? And in fact, electric vehicles are heavier, and a case could be made that they have a tendency to wear the roads out faster vis-a-vis the same size gasoline-powered vehicles. So that's how that came about. It was an increase on electric vehicles on top of an increase in registration fees, period.
But some states are doing getting miles per mile.
Right.
So I don't drive very much.
Yep.
Electric vehicles are great.
So Gary, this is one of the things that I would just add, and that is that I agree with you. I mean, we had raised the registration fee for 20 years and we were in a budget crunch. So this is what happened. Now, Personally, and this is what I said when I was in Annapolis, I get it. We have to raise registration fees. It's unfortunate that we have to double them instead of just raising them along the way because that's a big impact. And also, I vehemently disagreed with the idea of almost tripling it for electric vehicles. I thought that was a really bad idea. And I do think that vehicle miles traveled and other aspects and another way to kind of measure it is important because from an electric vehicle perspective, there's the total cost, all the externalities. People pay more for electric vehicles. Maybe they don't pay a gas tax. If they use the roads, they are heavier. But at the same time, they're not polluting the environment. At the same time, they're not causing all of the other issues. And so I think that is a fight to be continued. I agree.
Saman,
Hi, on the question of fees, as Democrats, you know, we're dealing with a massive crisis on affordability, and we're dealing with a massive crisis on affordability, everyday expenses. And I think one of the greatest challenges that we see is that everyday documentation, everyday licensing in the state is so expensive. I've talked to Lily about this so many times. We want to bolster entrepreneurship. Well, you know, a side hustle is great, but if the state charges me $300 a year to maintain my state licensing for a business, and the state draws $90 million in revenue over that, is unconscionable because even states like New York charge $50 a year. Virginia, it takes maybe 24 hours to get your licensing through. And if you don't pay like $300 or something for an expedited fee, by law, statutorily, your file can't be reviewed. And that's time lost for a business if someone needs to apply for a contract or anything. And then we're seeing so much happen in our state when it comes to voting rights. And in order to vote more and more across the country, you're seeing you need to have fundamental documentation, which is your driver's license. In the state of Maryland, we charge $50 for a driver's license. How is that acceptable when, you know, working class people live paycheck to paycheck? I mean, I remember it being like $10, $15 growing up. You can get it for like $6 a renewal. Suddenly, when these costs are aggregating, it becomes very difficult to live in a state like Maryland. And we say that we're a strongly, deeply democratically blue state. And how are we delivering for those? And what we're seeing is a brain drain. People are moving to Republican states because it's cheaper to live there. And that impacts our, you know, impacts our representation in Congress. And how do we handle that as a state that's deeply blue? Sorry, I know there were statements in that, but these are the examples we're giving of everyday increases.
Can I just, on the point, I mean, these are all excellent points. I mean, one thing is we need to grow our economy, our tax base, that solves our fiscal issues. But to your point about brain drain, that's a huge issue. You know, the number one, Brooke Learman, our comptroller, wrote a whole report about this last year. The number one reason our young folks are moving to North Carolina is the cost of housing. And we did do some things this year that I think remove some of the regulatory hurdles relative to Virginia, who are kicking our butt a little bit on permitting and more housing inventory. And we did some, I think, really important things this session. But if you start losing your young folks, your young talent, they graduate from Maryland and then they rush to Nashville, North Carolina, or, you know, or Nashville, Tennessee, or, you know, Charlotte or wherever, because it's cheaper. So housing affordability, I think, for this area, particularly Montgomery County, is the number one reason why young folks are leaving to cheaper places. And that, I think, then exacerbates the problem. You get brain drain, like these sectors, biotech, whatever. We need to keep the folks here, grow the tax base, and some of the financial issues sort of then correlate. And that's a big issue, but much of what you say is very much spot on. I agree with it.
we have 5 minutes.
This fee, I introduced the bill several years in a row and never moved because the state did not want to lose the windfall of now 100 million at least a year by collecting $300 for every business license. And you have to have that renewed every year in order to do business in Maryland. We are the least competitive on that front. It's a bipartisan outrage, but the state just just does not want to lose that. I think if we were smarter in those kind of policies, we would make it easier for businesses to register here. Because when they grow revenue and pay taxes, that's where we actually get wealthier as a community instead of cutting them off at the front, right? By collecting $300, whether they actually turn a profit or not. It's actually very short-sighted. But I, gave up because I just didn't see a path forward. If any of you want to step up, but one thing that frustrates me is when I talk to some colleagues and they have the kind of attitude, oh, businesses will be fine. No, they won't be. Okay, when they move out, you won't even know when they choose not to expand. How would they know if they choose not to come here? How would you know if they choose not to expand in your community and create jobs and pay taxes, right? I think it's just flat out arrogance in many ways,
Hi, my name is Ismail. I became a US citizen around about 2018, and I always thought politics was a bit of a dirty game, but here I am in my first town hall. So because what I realize is that the environment that I live in is affected by all the decisions that you guys make and on the bills and on the bills and that kind of stuff. So I had a whole bunch of questions, but I think in the interest of time, I'll probably boil it down to one. Just to give you a little bit of context, recently I was looking at my electricity bill and I noticed, I have that as a provider, and what I noticed was that between the hours of 6 to 9, if you're not on the flat plan rate, between the hours of 6 to 9 in the morning, electricity rates are high. And between the hours of 6 to 9 in the evening, electricity rates are higher. And in between, it's lower, right? These are the exact times that families wake up. They're getting ready to go to school, making breakfast and so on. And when you come back in the evening, you're making dinner and all of that stuff. So it seems like, to me, it seems like we're being charged unfairly just to use, whereas electricity should be something that should be of a benefit to us. So keeping that perspective in mind, if electricity companies can monitor our electricity usage at the exact hour and the time of day and so on, how is data center electricity usage being monitored? And are they being charged in that same fashion that we guys are being charged?
So I don't know if you came in the beginning, but we talked significantly about a lot of this. So what you're talking about are time of use rates. And that's what people use, especially in the summer. That's when people run their air conditioners when they come home. So there is a bill that I had a couple of years ago that we passed called the Drive Act, which basically allows for time of use rates so that you can, for example, like pre-cool your home. So run that air conditioning a little bit earlier, drop that temperature down a little bit more. But a lot of the costs that we see are what are called capacity market costs. And that is time of use when peaker plants are really, all the plants in the area are really working as hard as they can. These are really big issues that are very complicated. It's all within the whole PJM, which is, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, all of these states together. So these complicated issues can be resolved in a number of ways, which we're trying to resolve. One of them would be for you to install solar panels on your roof yourself, get your own electricity and net meter. Another one would be to do what's called, put storage in your house and, have some batteries so that you can back up and you can use it. It's really complicated, but there are a lot of ways that you can mitigate that. But this is as a result of, this is the time that everybody uses electricity. This is the time when everybody needs electricity. Not all the utilities have smart meters. Pepco, BG&E have smart meters. Potomac Edison doesn't. So that's why Pepco and BG&E can look at it down to the hour or the minute. As far as data centers are concerned, what we talked about before, which is limiting large growth and putting a tariff on it. So anything above 25 megawatts or more has to, generate their own electricity. A lot of guardrails we put on it. That is going to continue to change. We have 43 data centers in the state of Maryland right now. Most of them are considered pretty small. Some of them coming online are going to be larger. So as that comes online and as we move forward, we're going to make adjustments. We're going to continue to make adjustments. But a big piece of this Relief Act right now is to limit that so that only the small data centers can come in as being part of the load. And they still have to do a lot. It's the large load that we're really going after in a very, very big way. But we're going after all the loads. And again, this is going on all over the country. all over the world as these data centers are being built out for AI. I hope that helps, and I'm happy to stay afterward and talk to you in a lot more detail.
Okay, we're gonna have
Oh,
one more question, and then we're gonna go.
Larry, can I just,
Statements.
can I just do one on this data?
Yeah, you can.
In September, our Public Service Commission, which is our regulator of all this, is going to come back. They're tasked right now with coming up with a tariff schedule specifically for data centers. And that's where they're going to be having, and it's going to be elaborate, it's going to be sophisticated, a tariff schedule depending on size, et cetera, et cetera. So that is part of how they're going to have to pay their fair share. That's being worked out right now.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm here representing the disability community, and I promised many families that I would ask this question. I had submitted one online, but it didn't, wasn't read earlier. Affordability is a crisis, and in a couple of days, I'm going to have to tell my son's staff, who's been supporting my severely autistic son for 4.5 years, that they have to take a 30% pay cut because the legislature passed that. Can everyone here imagine what that's like? My son's caregivers cannot, they don't change the oil in their car. So I'm just asking everyone, this issue isn't going away. I'm asking the legislators, there are families going into crisis. I live in Potomac. I'm not going to go into crisis in the next year. I have a backup plan. Many families do not have a backup plan. They're going into crisis yesterday. And I'd like to know what the emergency plan is. My son spent 2 years in a psychiatric hospital, 3 years in a residential group home, 2 years in a traditional service model with self-direction is all we have. And it's being targeted and taken away. And I am privileged. The other question I have is, well, no, those are the two. What would you, how will I tell my staff? What would you have me tell them? And then what is the crisis plan? Because I had 5 family people who couldn't be here tonight because obviously they're dealing with their children. And they need to know what the emergency plan is for Montgomery County.
Okay, last year, folks came down for DDA Day. I mean, rally. I won't say this. None of us are on the budget committee. I don't mean to, just have to put that out there. But and then $400 million last year was restored. This year, there's no doubt about it because I myself have had bills. And I was the sponsor of the ABLE Act, which was to create tax deferred account for folks like your son that you can save for their future. But without question, this was the biggest disappointment of the session for all the reasons you described. And I, not being, sitting on that budget committee, I know that they restored 23 million, but this still was 127 or some million cut out of a population that, it's really difficult for me to give you an answer that would make any sense to you. I feel for what you're saying. We had advocates, we had the rallies, and again, I know that because I've been involved with the community from some of these other bills, but yes.
We have a Democratic governor who makes sense at reporting, and if we can't work to do it, we can't.
I agree with you, and it is heartbreaking what, the cuts that we had to make there. I would, and this is not an excuse, but I do put this, I'm not on the budget committee also, but there is a federal government element to this. So there were, the threats were that if certain, not all of them, but certain cuts weren't made in the program, we would lose even more money in federal funds for the program. So it's a Hobson's choice. It's a very difficult decision. I'm not making an excuse. I'm just saying that was a part of it. It was a part of it. It wasn't all of it. It was a part of it.
Going with recommendations and guidance, and the guidance was this guidance. And the numbers.
Thank you. Andrew's gonna speak for a couple of seconds and we'll ask for closing statements.
I was just going to recognize the last, thank you. We had two additional elected officials that we missed earlier. We missed Alan Hobbs from the Poolsville Town Commission, and Ed Reed, who is the Vice President of the Poolsville Town Commission, who's online as well. So thank you to all the elected officials who were here. We also have a number of candidates who are here, too many to highlight all of them. I think I also missed former Senate committee member Scott Goldberg. But we missed, there's a lot of candidates here. We can't highlight them all. Feel free to talk to one another after the program. Thank you all. I'm going to let it go back to them for closing statements.
We have allocated
15 seconds.
15 seconds.
Yeah, I think you guys heard enough from us. I don't have that much more to add. It was a very busy session. You heard a lot of the things we worked on, and some of you have been here since 6:30. So I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Delegate David Fraser-Hidalgo.
Just a big thank you to the caucus for putting this together, to Kathy, to Andrew, to everybody else that's done everything to make this happen. A big thank you again for all those folks that organized this. Thank you.
Let me add my thanks to the D15 caucus and to all of you for showing up and asking your questions and engaging with us. It really is an honor and a privilege to represent you in Annapolis. Let me just say that, these are really, really tough times for all of us, certainly for all of you. And the only thing I would say is we're trying to do the best we can to make sure that we represent your interests. I left some end of session letters back on the table that summarize some of the stuff we talked about. If you're interested in seeing those, if you haven't seen them. And again, thank you for coming out tonight and for letting us represent you.
I want to say that as Democratic supermajority, it's easy for us to say, let's fight Trump and fight the federal government, which has been more than reckless and hell-bent on destroying our community and economy. But I think this is also a moment of reckoning for the state of Maryland and for Montgomery County. It's important that we also find our own sense of complacency and get serious about growing our economy organically and building a stronger community. So we don't have to come back and use tax and fees and all of that to make people's life harder and to drive away small businesses that are really the bread and butter of our community. We just cannot look to the federal government that's increasingly unreliable as an economic engine for our community. It's more than clear by now, right? So I hope we all get the memo and work together on that. So thank you for your engagement.
So thank you very much to our legislators. Thank you, Larry, for moderating, and thank you for all who have attended. And I just real quick, I wanted to mention we are having a fun run again. It's going to be on September 27th. We're looking for sponsors. So if you're a candidate, if you have a small business, we're looking to have you added as our sponsors. It's going to be great. It's going to be September 27th. The money is going to go for things like this today. We're having also a listening session in Potomac. We had one in Clarksburg, in Germantown. So this time it's going to be in Potomac on the 22nd. I have flyers for anybody here. Please pick up a flyer and come. And also we've got new business cards. If anybody says they want to volunteer, this has a QR code for you to sign up and volunteer. We are looking for people to help on election day. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you all and good night.